It almost sounds absurd for a white woman in Mississippi in the year 2022 to suggest that the character she most relates to in a short story written in 1957 is a black man from Harlem. I mean, what do I know about oppression, racism, and growing up in an inner city? Not one thing. But like Sonny, I do know a lot about addiction, suffering, and toxic shame. A shame so toxic that it feels like home because it's the only thing I've ever been tethered to my whole life. To be clear, you can read James Baldwin's entire short story, Sonny's Blues, and never see the word shame, but I recognized it instantly in the only word Sonny's brother knew to call it when he says, "Daddy was a big and rough and loud-talking man, just the opposite of Sonny, but they both had that same privacy." The story begins with Sonny's brother finding out that Sonny had been arrested for dealing heroin and believing that addiction is a moral failing. He's having a hard time accepting the news because while Sonny was wild, he wasn't crazy, and he'd always been a good boy, never turning hard or evil or disrespectful. And in that context, it's no surprise when he admits that although there were clear indications of drug abuse, he just didn't want to believe it. Now, this took me back to memories of each baffled and perplexed friend, family member, teacher, and preacher that ever asked me, "What's wrong with you that you can't see how this is hurting your kids and just stop doing it?" And I grab my head with both hands, bury my face in my lap, and say, "I don't know why." And I meant that. Every bit as sincere as Sonny was when he said, "I've been something I don't recognize." The only thing I was certain of was that I was so uncomfortable in my own skin that if I believed peeling it off would allow my soul to be free, I would have done it. And what Sonny knew was that he wanted to be a jazz musician. I used to think that there was something about my very nature that cried out for failure, but now I know there was always a traumatized, crying, screaming child inside me, locked away from my consciousness, rattling the cage that confines her, desperate for someone, anyone, to bear witness to her existence. Baldwin says it this way: "Some escaped the trap, most didn't. Those who got out always left something of themselves behind, like animals that amputate a leg and leave it in the trap. And it's always at the hour of trouble and confrontation that missing member aches." I think maybe some wounds are inflicted so early in our lives that we haven't yet formed words. Or maybe some traumas are so heinous that they shatter our psyche, and there are no words within comprehension that translate that level of violence. Regardless, the carnage left behind distinguishes us from those who know better than to reach for anything that'll promise to alter reality. Once we find it, whatever it is that quiets that crying, screaming child, and we inhale the first full breath we've ever taken and exhale into a relief that we're certain must be what others call normal, nothing, and I mean nothing, can convince us that it is a problem. On the contrary, it is our solution. The problem then must be anything that stands between us and our solution. Sonny tried to explain this to his brother when he talked to him about how heroin makes you feel distant, warm, but cool at the same time, in control, and sometimes you just gotta have that feeling. But the thing is, for Sonny, at first, the it was music. But like many artists, nobody really took him serious, and believing that it was a phase that he'd grow out of, his brother just insisted that he stay in Harlem and finish school. Here's the thing. Once stifled, even if we know intellectually that what we're doing is unhealthy, folks like Sonny and me will offer up our will and our lives to the care of drugs. Risking death and destruction rather than live another fucking moment, aching and shaking from the reverberation of the moans and groans of an otherwise mute child. Or, as Sonny puts it, to be able to make it at all, on any level, in order to keep from shaking to pieces. Only The more vigorously we chase the lightning, the louder the crying, screaming child gets, having built a tolerance to the only thing that ever did what it promised to do, which was numb everything. And we realize that this invisible loyalty to a drug that made us feel alive is really just us killing ourselves on an installment plan. Said another way, Sonny proclaims, I was all by myself at the bottom of something, stinking and sweating and crying and shaking, and I smelled it, my stink. And I thought I'd die if I couldn't get away from it, and yet, all the same, I knew everything I was doing was locking me in with it. And I didn't know, I still don't know, something kept telling me that maybe it was good to smell your own stink, but I didn't think that was what I'd been trying to do. Well, I'll tell you this moment of reckoning is visited upon each of us who survive our addiction, presented as a gift of desperation. The good news about that is, when the pain of remaining the same becomes greater than our fear of change, we will let go. I love how Sonny says it when he says, but the man who creates the music is hearing something else, is dealing with the roar rising from the void and imposing order on it as it hits the air. What is evoked in him then is of another order, more terrible because it has no words, and triumphant too for that same reason. And his triumphs are ours. To sum it up, Sonny's brother finally agrees to go to the nightclub to hear him play, where he's shocked to learn that in the jazz kingdom, rather than heroin, Sonny's veins bore royal blood. And he understood at last, Sonny could help us all to be free if we would listen, and that he would never be free until we did. Yet there was no battle on his face now. His brother says, I heard what he had gone through and would continue to go through until he came to rest. James Baldwin, an alcoholic himself, introduces us to the miraculous healing power of creativity in this short story. What a service to his fellow man, even as he struggled with his own addiction. I guess in this way, I identify with Baldwin too, as I find myself creating this project on borrowed time from within the walls of an addiction treatment facility. And so it goes. For while the tale of how we suffer and how we are delighted and how we may triumph is never new, it must always be heard. There isn't any other tale to tell. It's the only light we've got in all this darkness. While I present this to you with lots of gratitude today, let us not forget those who have lost their lives to addiction, whether by overdose, car accident, or maybe by suicide, a mercy kill of sorts, for their crying, screaming child whose agony they could no longer bear.